dude, you're about to be on one of the worst teams in football.
San Francisco has a lead late in that Super Bowl, and what does fucking Kyle Shanahan do?
Brady doesn't have to prove shit.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Slightly Sideways podcast, episode 9. I am your host, Koenig, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Corbin. Say hello to the people, Corbin.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a great week so far, and thanks for joining us on our 9th episode.
Yes. But before we get into tonight's show, as always, we do like to go over the drinks that we're having during the program. On my end, I'm going with a mixed drink tonight. We're actually recording the show for the first time on a Thursday, and so with work tomorrow, I just feel like mixed drinks settle a little bit easier than beers. So in a San Diego State glass, I'm going with the vodka cranberry. I had a few of these in our first ever episode, and so I thought I would kind of, roll it back a little bit, go with an old favorite. Corbin, what are you drinking on your end?
Yeah, so on my end here, I'm not too concerned about getting too turnt. I work from home, and hell, it's going to be Friday tomorrow, so whatever. I am rolling with something a little bit different. I'm rolling with a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. This is a drink that I've had before. It's been a while since I've had it, so I'd be interested to see if I like it, if I don't like it. It's pretty much the only beer that I've ever seen my Uncle Bob drink, as long as I can remember. All he drinks is the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, so I'm going to give it a go here, and yeah, I'll let you know at the end of the show my rating on the Pale Ale.
There you go. But before we get into tonight's show, we do like to plug our social media. If you haven't already, give us a follow on Twitter at Slightly Sideway. If you're on Facebook, you can like our page at Slightly Sideways Podcast. If you have any feedback or ideas for future episodes of our show, you can email us at slightlysidewayspod@gmail.com. If you're on Spotify, you can follow our podcast at Slightly Sideways Podcast and catch up on all of the episodes you may have missed. And if you're on YouTube, do be sure to subscribe at Slightly Sideways Podcast, ring that bell for all notifications so you do not miss a single upload, and of course, like the video for the YouTube algorithm so we can expand our community and ensure that our content gets brought to a larger audience. Corbin, what do we have for episode 9?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of topics to touch on here today. We'll be going into the NBA Conference Finals previews. So we're down to 4 teams in the NBA. We'll also be looking into Week 1 reaction for the NFL season. Technically, the second week of the season has started today. We have a game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. So we're already into Week 2, if you can believe it. And then we'll also be going into the Big Ten football. They've made a big decision just yesterday as far as their current season. We'll give you those details here shortly. On top of that, Koenig, what else do we have for the people?
So we got a quick update on the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. It looks like the Dallas Stars have made their way to the Stanley Cup final. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's going on in the Eastern Conference as well. We'll have a few brief notes about the Sheffield United match from this past Monday. And of course, we'll end the show as always with the unknown. Corbin will be in charge of the unknown this week, so stay tuned to hear what kind of sick things he's going to make me do. For our first segment, we do want to take a moment to discuss the NBA Conference Finals. As Corbin said earlier, we do have 4 teams remaining. In the Western Conference, we have the Los Angeles Lakers and the Denver Nuggets. And in the Eastern Conference, we have the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat. Given the 4 teams that are remaining, would you say that you're surprised with the 4 teams that remain left?
I'm surprised with 2 of them. The Nuggets getting through after being down in 2 consecutive series, 3-1, is pretty remarkable, if you ask me. The Miami Heat, I didn't expect them to get past the Bucks, and they got past the Bucks with relative ease. So those 2 teams, yes. The Lakers and the Celtics, no. I think most people eyed the Lakers and the Celtics both as favorites to get out of their conferences. So with them still in it, it's not too much of a surprise.
Yeah, and I agree especially about the Nuggets. I was very surprised that the Nuggets have made it to where they are. Like Corbin said, they're the first team in NBA history to come back from 2 3-1 deficits in a single postseason. So you're talking about a team that is incredibly resilient, led, of course, by Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. It's a team that it seemingly plays their best when their back is against the wall. When they have that adversity, when they have a situation where they have to find a way to win, it seems like the Denver Nuggets are always finding a way to win. You know, you're talking about a team that faced double-digit deficits against the Clippers in games 5, 6, and 7. In all 3 of those games, the Clippers were up by double digits, and Denver ultimately won each of those contests. So I do think that Denver poses a very serious threat to the Lakers, just because of the fact that it's like you can almost never rule them out. It's almost as though no matter what the situation is, Denver is always going to have a chance until you eliminate them.
Yeah, and it's, here's a team in the Lakers that they got through their 2 series, 4-1 in both those series, so they haven't really had much adversity to have to fight through. And then here's the Nuggets that are the complete opposite end, where they were facing elimination 6 times in the last 2 series alone and came out on top. The playoffs is all about being battle tested, so you kind of have to give a little bit of a nod to the Nuggets to be like, okay, like this team knows that when they're down, they're not out. They're coming up against their best opponent, in my opinion, in the Lakers. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a good idea for the Nuggets to get down 3-1 in this series. But if they do, clearly they've proven that doesn't mean that they're done. So it will be interesting to see how they come out in game 1 tomorrow. The Lakers, they've had a little rest time, so I don't know if they're going to have a little bit of rust just from sitting around a little bit more than they're used to. The Nuggets are coming right into this series firing on all cylinders, as they've had to have been on these last 3 games. So should be a good series, should be a fun series.
For sure. And, a lot of people have kicked the idea around in, the social media sphere and everything like that of, is this a good reflection of the 4 best teams in the league this year? And I think some people might be able to say that it's up for debate whether these teams that are remaining are the 4 best teams. But I do think that these teams were able to kind of correctly and efficiently navigate the postseason format the best. You're talking about a situation where this is an unprecedented season. Teams are competing down in the Orlando bubble in an environment that surely many of them are experiencing for the very first time, having to play in an environment where they're away from family. They've been in the bubble since the 1st of August and playing all of their games with no fans, obviously, so you don't really have that home court advantage to kind of push you through some of those tough times. And it's all about, like I said before, being able to navigate that and being able to say, despite all of these things that are going on around us, we're still able to focus and compete at a high level. And given all of the circumstances, the teams who are remaining have been able to do that the best.
And there's going to be haters out there. There's going to be Clipper fans and Utah Jazz fans that are going to say, oh, well, if we didn't have this bubble situation, things would have been different. And, there's no way you guys would have come back from a 3-1 series deficit if you had to play 1 or 2 games on the road and have that home court advantage. But credit the Nuggets. I mean, they played in the same situation as every other team. So there's no excuses in my eyes. But you are going to have those people that are going to say, oh, yeah, well, they beat the Clippers, but, these circumstances that these players are playing within is outside of their element and that threw off their game or what have you. But to those people, find a better excuse. We got the Nuggets and Lakers. And then on the Eastern side, we've got Koenig's Boston Celtics versus the Miami Heat. And that series is actually, they've already started. They're actually playing game 2 as we speak. So kind of weird that the Western Conference Finals hasn't even started yet, and there'll be 2 games played in the East. Koenig, do you want to give a little update on the current series and then your reflection on how these teams got there?
The Boston Celtics were able to get rid of the Toronto Raptors in 7 games, which was a very, very competitive series. And like Corbin said before, you have the Miami Heat who dispatched the Milwaukee Bucks with relative ease. There was a little bit of drama in that series. There's a little bit of a officiating fiasco, but no excuse. The fact of the matter is, Miami handled the Milwaukee Bucks, who I thought was a surefire team to make it out of the conference. They handled them very easily. And I am hearing in my ear as we speak that Miami has taken a 2-0 series lead against the Boston Celtics.
Oh
They
wow.
won game 2 tonight 106 to 101. So I said it kind of going into the series. I know that we didn't really have this on the show last week, but I know Corbin and I have kind of been talking outside of the program. Miami is tough, and they're playing with confidence. They're playing with a swagger to them. And I will say this about the Boston Celtics: it really feels as though they're a mentally fragile team. And what I mean by that is the Boston Celtics were coasting through the playoffs. They took care of the 76ers, no problem. They were up 2-0 against Toronto, and Toronto made that game-winning three in game 3. And it's almost like the wheels almost fell off for the Celtics. They totally let Toronto back into that game. And I'm not taking anything away from the Raptors, but what I am saying is the Celtics kind of lack that killer instinct a little bit, it seems.
Yeah, and not a good team to face up with that current mojo. The Heat, if I can add on to what Koenig mentioned, they're just a gritty team. They play probably the best defense of the final teams remaining. They've got experienced players. I'm a big fan of Jimmy Butler. Some people think he's an asshole or he's whatever. I think he's a great player. He's got just the attitude needed to perform well in the playoffs. We've got Bam Adebayo playing out of his mind in the paint right now, seemingly gobbling up anything that comes his way.
He stuffed Jason Tatum in game 1. That was brutal.
Yeah, and the Heat are just one of those teams where, no pun intended, they're on fire. The Heat are on fire. And to take a 2-0 lead, I mean, again, there's no home court advantage, so it's not like they went to Boston and won 2 games in Boston. I mean, they're playing on a neutral court with no fans. So, yes, a 2-0 lead looks pretty nice, but I don't count out the Celtics because it just takes a game to get your rhythm back. If the Celtics can win game 3 and kind of say to themselves, like, all right, we can beat this team, like, let's get ourselves back and going. Jason Tatum is a tremendous player. Gosh, I wish they would have passed on him and he would have fallen to the Suns at number 4 a few years back, but that didn't happen. The Celtics knew better. The Eastern, I'm actually kind of torn because normally I'm a Western Conference guy, and even though the series in the East is 2-0, I'm really curious to see how Boston responds. Obviously, if they get down 3-0, then they're going to be in trouble for sure. But game 3 is going to be really big. It's going to kind of determine if it's going to be, honestly, I think either a sweep or if it can go possibly 6 and who knows, maybe 7 games.
Honestly, it's not as though the Celtics are getting the brakes beat off them or anything like that. Game 1 went into overtime. Jimmy Butler made some big plays down the stretch in game 1 to kind of get that to overtime. And tonight's game, Miami, they won the game, but it was a 5-point game. It's not like Miami's blowing the Celtics out of the water. But again, I do think that the Celtics are mentally fragile. I don't think that necessarily they have the mental fortitude to overcome the adversity like the Denver Nuggets have been able to, just because the road was so much clearer for them and they haven't really had to face much adversity. The only adversity I think that they faced in this series was game 7 against Toronto, and they survived that. But it seems like when things start to not go the Celtics way, they just crumble under that environment. So we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. Like Corbin said, game 3 is going to be a huge game for the Celtics and for Miami for that matter, because they could really just put their foot down and assert themselves on that series, put a stranglehold on it.
I will add one point to the Heat Celtics series. In game 1, the Celtics had a chance to win it at the end of the game and had one of the worst last shots of a quarter where they practically stood around for like 20 seconds and then Tatum just kind of threw up this, I don't even know what to call it. It wasn't even a shot. He just kind of threw up this brick in contention. It was terrible. There was no play drawn up, and then ultimately they went into overtime and lost. But that was a little head scratching, especially with Brad Stevens. Everyone says he's such a great coach, X's and O's, and for him to draw up a play like that at the end of the game was kind of like, really? That was
Yeah.
that's what you guys had? Okay, but I don't know. You live and learn, I guess, and we'll see how they respond.
And it kind of gets you to thinking, now that we're really deep into the weeds in this NBA postseason, the bubble format with the no fans and with the whole teams playing without that environment that you're used to, and maybe the playoffs, which, some of these arenas, they're rocking and rolling and they're creating that energy. Corbin, as someone who's more of an NBA fan than maybe me, would you say that the playoff format has been engaging for you as a viewer?
Yes, I think the quality of basketball, for the most part, has been really good. It's been a hard hurdle for me to get over the fact that there's not fans there. And I do think that that's had a big impact on a lot of these series. Because if you think about it, a team like the Heat, they've gotten into a rhythm. They know they don't have to travel, they don't have to go anywhere, they don't have to break their rhythm. They play their games, they practice, they stay where they're staying. They don't have to worry about, like, okay, now we got to get on a plane and fly to Miami or fly to Boston. So there are distractions like that that are cut out. Like you mentioned, there is momentum in playoff games that the crowd can kind of help, I don't know, put into motion for the home team. So I do miss that, because that's one thing that makes the NBA playoffs so great, is when you have a home team that's down by 10 points in the third quarter, and then they hit a couple shots, the home crowd starts going crazy. Before you know it, they're on a 12-0 run, they have the lead. So you're not seeing too much of that right now, which is to be expected given the current situation and on where the teams are playing and how they're playing. But the basketball has been competitive. It's not like the basketball has been poor and the players have been out of shape and just dragging ass up and down the court. They've put on a good performance. I'm pleased with the output.
That's good to know. As somebody who enjoys the NBA, I'm really not a huge NBA guy. I've always been someone who's very critical of the NBA. I feel like the referees just call the games so tight. Like, they don't give the players enough leeway. It feels like in the NBA, it's black or it's white, and there's no gray area. And especially when you're in a competitive environment where players are competing for a championship, it seems almost as though like there's a foul on every possession in the NBA, and it just kind of slows the game down and it drags it out a little bit. And I don't know. I'm not really a fan, but honestly, I wouldn't be a fan if there were fans and if there were home venues, to be honest. Like, I'm not huge into the NBA.
I mean, superstars definitely do get the calls, and that's true even outside of the playoffs. That's true during the regular season. It is a tough job as far as to be an NBA official, because, I mean, if you think about it, you throw the ball down in the paint, big man's got the ball, he's turning around. Whether he's getting fouled or not, the guy's screaming and yelling like he is getting fouled. So, they go up for a basket, and then the ref has to determine, like, oh, like, did he actually get fouled or did he not? And they have to make that decision in a split second. They can't wait a second or two while the ball is going back up the other court and then go, oh, you know what, foul. So, yeah, it's not the most perfect situation in the world. And honestly, it gets harder and harder because athletes continue to get bigger, stronger, faster. So it's only going to continue to be a problem. It's just one of those things that, like, I'm trying to get used to. It drives you crazy when you have a team that doesn't have a superstar like the Suns, and you tend to get those calls against you. But it's just one of those things where it is what it is, and you just hope that a bad call here or there is not going to be the difference in the game, which unfortunately sometimes it is, but it is what it is.
We'll have a whole lot more NBA coming your way. Obviously, we'll be able to cover the Eastern Conference Finals wrap up next week. We'll hopefully have a pretty good start on the Western Conference Finals as well. But stay tuned to the channel for the updates on that. We will move quickly into the NFL. And we did want to cover the topic week one. We don't want to go into the weeds and discuss every aspect of week one, but there were a couple of maybe surprises, I guess you could say, in week one of the NFL season. Corbin, out of the games that were on, what would you say was a surprise? Who did you think maybe overachieved in week one, and who did you think maybe underachieved in week one?
There's three games that I look at in particular. There's a fourth if you really want to count it, but to kind of stick with the big three here, Jacksonville over the Colts. As you guys know from our previous episode, I had given the Jacksonville Jaguars 2 wins on the year, and they go ahead and they beat the Colts week one. So I was dogging on Gardner Minshew, and the guy played outstanding. Now, who knows? Maybe they'll be awful the rest of the year. We'll have to wait and see. So that was a little surprising. The Colts were kind of a no-show. The Lions losing to the Bears. The Lions were up 23-6 going into the fourth quarter. It looked like they pretty much had that wrapped up. Somehow they let the Bears come back. Mitchell Trubisky and the Chicago Bears come back on them. And then to make matters worse, the Lions had the ball to score to win the game at the end of the game, and they had one of their receivers drop a touchdown pass in the end zone. Oh. Ultimately, they lost that game because of that, or not because of that, but, since he didn't catch a touchdown pass, they lost. And then the big one was the Cardinals beating the NFC champion 49ers. in San Francisco. Not that that really matters because there's no fans there, but the Cardinals go in there and they beat a really, really good team. I want to say that maybe they'll get more than 6 wins than I had predicted, but I still don't think the Cardinals are going to be this world burner. But impressive nonetheless from those 3 games. Koenig, did you see anything outside of that you wanted to kind of add to?
You talk about the topic of overachieving, and for me, I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say the biggest overachiever in week 1 for me was the Green Bay Packers.
Ooh, the Packers overachieved?
Overachieved, in my opinion, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Green Bay, and we talked about this on last week's show, Green Bay doesn't necessarily have the cream of the crop for weapons for Aaron Rodgers. They didn't go out and get any viable options for him to throw the ball to, and Green Bay went up against, in my eyes, a very, very stout Vikings defense. And Green Bay ended up scoring 43 points in that game. You had Aaron Rodgers, who threw for over 350 yards with 4 touchdowns. Like I said, with a lack of any kind of notable receivers. You had Devontae Adams, who led all receivers with 14 catches, over 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'm not saying the Green Bay Packers are not a good team. That's not exactly what I want to convey. My main thing that I want to say in terms of being an overachiever, I just don't see this being sustainable over an entire season. And obviously that's like an obvious statement. Like, well, yeah, no shit, Koenig. They're not going to score 43 points a week. But like in terms of teams that performed far above maybe their expectation, I would definitely say that the Packers were definitely one of those teams. If you're talking about a team that underachieved, and again, maybe not a team that's bad, but maybe a team that had a bad week, I'm really pointing at San Francisco. I know Corbin mentioned the fact that the Cardinals were a surprise, and as surprising as the Cardinals were, I think it was equally surprising that San Francisco played the way that they did. I know the 49ers were without a couple of their better receivers, but it was actually the 49ers defensively that I found to be particularly troubling. You had a team like Arizona, and granted, they got DeAndre Hopkins now. He led all receivers with 151 yards. But Arizona in that game has over 400 yards of offense. And this is a team, San Francisco, who, in my eyes, managed to fight their way all the way to the Super Bowl largely because of their stout defense. They made their money last year on being able to shut teams down. Teams weren't getting 400 yards of offense against the 49ers last year. You also had Kyler Murray, who ran for almost 100 yards on a touchdown all by himself. So if you're thinking about underachievers, I think that that team is definitely the 49ers, because I think that they can play a whole lot better than what they showed in week 1. I don't think the 49ers or their fans have anything to worry about. I think San Francisco is going to be fine. They had a total stinker, and that sucks, but they underachieved. They're going to be much more successful than what they showed in week 1.
One thing that I think a lot of people need to understand, though, is this is week 1 of the season with no preseason. So the only competition that these teams have seen has been themselves. And you say what you will about preseason, but coaches do take that opportunity to kind of flex their playbook and kind of show a little bit of what they're going to try to do this upcoming season, see if it works, see if it doesn't. I'm not saying that I'm going to give the 49ers a pass, because I do think that they are ultimately the better team, but they haven't seen live action since the Super Bowl. And all of a sudden they're thrown into a game again, like Koenig mentioned. They were without their number 1 and number 2 receiver, which again, their issues more or less were on the defensive side of the ball. But when you really don't have a whole lot to go off of as far as like a preseason or even having your players playing at live speed, even during preseason, to kind of get back into that flow of like live game speed, it can really show. And that's what showed on Sunday against the Cardinals. The Cardinals' speed more or less kind of took them out. Now they're going to make their adjustments, and I think the more live action they see against other teams, I think they're going to be okay. I would be very surprised if the Cardinals beat them again. I do want to add, I think one of the biggest performances was definitely DeAndre Hopkins. And a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, he had 150 yards receiving. Honestly, I think receiving yards is a very overrated stat, because if you think about it, you could have one big catch. You could have a 60-yard touchdown pass and then a 20-yard catch, and people would be like, oh, yeah, he had a pretty good game. 80 yards and the touchdown. It's like, well, he had 2 catches. So he was really impactful on 2 plays. But Hopkins, 14 catches. I mean, the guy got open on an NFL defense, NFL corner and secondary 14 times in order to make a catch. That's impressive. That's way more impressive than the 151 yards, which that's impressive too. But 14 catches, that's what I look at and I go, this is the mark of a good receiver, a receiver who can continuously get open and make catches. The nice thing about Hopkins is he does exactly what he needs to do. If it's 3rd and 8 and they need a first down, boom, 9-yard catch, first down, moves the sticks. He just knows where the sticks are. He knows how to get open. He's just a safety blanket for any quarterback, and it's going to be really exciting to see what the Cardinals do with him and Kyler Murray going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be interesting to see because Corbin pointed to the fact that we didn't have any preseason. And so it'll be interesting to see that as NFL defenses kind of catch up a little bit. Because I do think that at this point, the offense is ahead of the defense in the season. So it would seem that as the season would go on, the defensive players are going to catch up to speed with the offense. And so is whatever Arizona's doing, is that sustainable over a 16-game season? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But, of everything that you saw in week 1, was there anything in particular? I know we talked about our preview and predictions on last week's show. If you haven't caught that yet, you can catch it on Spotify or on YouTube. Was there anything that you saw in week 1 that maybe caught you to change your opinion on a couple teams?
I think the Jaguars are going to be a little bit better than the 2-14 record that I gave them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying now all of a sudden that the Jaguars are going to go 8-8 or something crazy. The Cardinals, it's just so tough because, again, it's week 1 after going against teams that have had no live action since last season. So I don't want to put too much stock into what we saw. Yes, there were some teams that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit as far as how I thought they would play and how they did play. But I would say the Jaguars and the Cardinals were the two that I kind of was like, okay, maybe these guys aren't as bad as I thought they were.
For sure. And I mean, I want to highlight your point. For me personally, I'm sticking kind of with my predictions. And again, it's the first week of the season. It's a 16-week season. I didn't really see anything that was like so groundbreaking that caused me to want to change my opinion on any teams. It'll take consecutive games of either stinker performances or really good performances before I start to scratch my head and say, okay, maybe this team is much better than we thought, or maybe they're much worse than we thought. One game, it's still early on. There's still a lot of season to play. As far as impact players in week 1, I thought it was a really good week for quarterbacks. Obviously, we mentioned Aaron Rodgers, who had over 300 yards with 4 touchdowns. Someone we hadn't mentioned, Russell Wilson, was very good against the Falcons also, completing over 30 passes on 35 attempts. He had like 350 plus yards and 4 touchdowns to his name also. And I really have high aspirations for Russell Wilson. I think this could definitely be a coming out year for him. I think he's obviously an MVP candidate. So we'll see how the season plays out for him.
You know what's crazy is that Russell Wilson has never received one MVP vote in his career.
Never.
Not one.
Crazy.
Which is just insane because every year you hear people say, top 5 quarterbacks in the league, and he's always in there. Everybody just talks about how wonderful he is, and there's nothing but glowing reviews, but it's like, okay, everyone's saying how terrific this guy is, yet he gets no love as far as like an MVP caliber type of season. Even when they were going and winning Super Bowls with the Legion of Boom and Beast Mode. So I thought that was a little funny that, we hear these wonderful things about him constantly, yet he doesn't really get the love from like the voters. To kind of add to like players that impressed week 1, there was a couple rookies that I thought were very impressive. Chase Young, the defensive end from the Washington football team. He was the number 2 overall pick from Ohio State. A lot of people said that he was the best overall talent to come out of the draft this last year. He had 1.5 sacks in his debut. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, coming out of LSU, 138 yards and a touchdown. Both very, very, very strong debuts. It'll be interesting to see how these guys progress through the season, if they can maintain that high level of play, or if teams are going to be able to adjust and kind of throw them off their game, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a different viewing experience than maybe we're used to. I know that I had a whole lot of sports on my TV. I had the laptop up, I had the tablet up, I had the phone up. I tried to get as many games on as possible. But to be honest, from my perspective, I watched pretty much football all day on Sunday, and I was really going into it trying not to have any sort of preconceived notions on what I thought it might be or anything like that. I just kind of went in and said, hey, let's watch the games and let's just kind of see how it is from a viewing experience perspective. And I was actually surprised because I feel like at times I'm like so focused on the games and what the announcers are saying, especially like when Tony Romo's on commentary. I personally think that Tony Romo is one of the better commentators out there. And I just feel like that while I'm watching the games, I'm just like so dialed into what's happening on the field. It seems like NFL is that one sport that I really don't care what the fans are doing. It seems like out of all the sports, the NFL, I don't want to say they're the least impactful because I think baseball fans are the least impactful. But I actually didn't think it took away from the experience at all. I was really surprised by that. Corbin, what did you think about the viewing experience?
The thing that I love about football, especially going to football games, is just that atmosphere and that energy that you get from a crowd. And you can just kind of tell that you have that influence on your team when they're playing poorly or when they're playing really well. You can continue to elevate them as they play well. So I get really jacked up, even when I'm watching games on TV and I see the crowd really getting into it, really fired up. But I think that that has more of an impact in college football than it does
Yeah.
professional. Just because, again, these guys are professional athletes. They've been there, they've done that. NFL fans, though good fans, are not as rowdy as college fans are, in my opinion.
Yes.
Players in college level can get rattled a lot more than NFL players can. So, yes, even when NFL players can get loud at times, I don't necessarily think that you don't hardly see as many false start penalties in the NFL or like delay of game penalties that you do in college. So, I think that's evidence to kind of show that these players have the ability to block that out. So, with that in mind, I kind of miss that noise to kind of like get the blood pumping, if you will, like that adrenaline. But the quality of football is still there. And like Koenig mentioned, I'm still engaged in it. One thing I think is cool is when like referees are calling penalties, you can kind of hear like the players like chattering in the background and talking to each other.
Yeah.
And like the field mics are picking up like what players are saying, which I think is kind of cool. So it's a plus and minus for me, but I'm fine with it. The level of football is still there, the commentary is still there, and it's okay.
One thing that if I had any criticism of this so far, what I would say is I think that the pumped in crowd noise from NFL films, I learned this from watching I think it was the Patriots game on Sunday. One thing that NFL films is doing is based off of the down and distance and the outcome of the play, they're pumping in actual crowd noise from similar situations in previous games at that own stadium. At first, it sounds like a really, really good idea because it's like, oh, they want to add to the atmosphere and it wants to be authentic and it wants it to be very much like the fans were there because they're pulling it from that, like I said, similar circumstance that was in the past. But to me, it just kind of came across as like the laugh track on a sitcom, you know? It's just kind of like a thing would happen and the crowd, ah, ha, ha. And it was like just an afterthought. It just seems so weird to me. Like, if I had one criticism from NFL Week 1, just don't do the crowd noise. Please. It's so cringe. It's so cringe, dude.
Well, and what's weird too is I feel like in some of the games, and I don't know if it's just the network adjusting the volume as far as what we can hear on our end, some of them seem way louder than others. So it's like, okay, are some of these teams just cranking that shit all the way up to be like as loud as possible to drown out the offense? That was interesting. Again, I don't know if it's the network that's just tuning that down, Fox compared to CBS, but I thought that was a little strange.
So we'll get into more NFL in the weeks to come. Obviously, as the season unwinds, we'll have more to talk about with the NFL. But we did want to quickly transition into college football. Big announcement that came out yesterday out of the Big Ten. The Big Ten has announced that they will return to football this season at the end of October. We've talked about the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and some of these other Power 5 conferences quite a bit over the last few weeks on our show. Given the news that came out of the Big Ten Conference yesterday, Corbin, what did you think?
Let's go ahead and give a moment of silence for people who have morals on what they should be doing compared to what they should not be doing. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, it's just, I'm so frustrated because you've got these teams nationwide like the University of Charlotte, the 49ers, they were supposed to play North Carolina this weekend, and they had to cancel the game because they didn't have enough offensive linemen to play the game due to coronavirus. So they didn't have players to field a team. Yet, here's the Big Ten, who was the whistleblower to begin with, saying, we're not going to do this. We're not going to play this. It's not smart. We're going to be the leader here. And then the Pac-12 followed suit. The Mountain West followed suit. A bunch of Group 5 conferences followed suit. FCS followed suit. And then 1 week of college football, and they go, you know what? They played 1 week of football, and it wasn't all too terrible. Maybe we could do that. It's all these fat cats at these schools that are like, hey, you realize that we're missing out on millions and millions of dollars here, right? Like, yeah, you can't have fans in your stadium, but like, dude, TV contracts, advertisements, we could still be making a ton of money here. And that's what it boils down to. These people who are saying, oh, well, you know what? We reevaluated and determined that it was safe for our student. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Maybe a doctor told you that because you told them to tell you that. It's all about the money here. The first vote wasn't even close. Like everybody, it was pretty much everybody saying, yeah, we don't want to do this anymore, other than like Nebraska. And then the second vote around, everybody unanimously votes to start the football season back up again. It's just, I'm at a loss for words. I'm so frazzled. Koenig, take over.
Money makes the world go round. That's what they say. And Corbin and I were kind of bantering back and forth on this topic a little bit earlier in the week. It actually came out of Louisiana State University. Head coach Ed Orgeron announced that most of his team, quote unquote, most of his team has COVID-19. And just like, yeah, you know, we all have it, but we're going to keep playing. Like, do we not understand how morally incorrect that is? Forget the fact of talking about human wellness and things like that. You're continuing to push these players. There's a whole concept of whether they should be paid or not. Honestly, don't even care what side of the argument you are for that. But you're just pushing these student athletes onto the field, saying, hey, you know, our whole team has COVID-19, but you know what? We're going to go out there, we're going to play, we're going to expose other players to this, the teams that we're playing against. It's just ridiculous.
You know what's so wonderful is you've got schools like North Carolina that are not having any of their students on campus because it's not safe. But football team, it's okay for you to be here and practice and play football games. What? Like, how does that make any sense? You're telling all your students, no, like, sorry, guys, like, this is dangerous. You can't do this. But then you're telling your football team, hey, football team, don't worry about what we told everybody else. Just dance, monkey, dance. Go and make us money and just don't worry about it. It's so frustrating. And shame on the Big Ten, man. Again, you were the one that said, hey, we're going to make this change. And we're going to do this for the good, and hopefully people follow suit. And then people did follow suit. Other conferences did. And then to flip-flop right back to say, oh, you know what? Like, we changed our mind. We're going to be coming back in October. So not even, in about a month's time, they're going to be playing games again. What really sucks for a conference like the Pac-12 is they have states like California and Oregon that it's going to take those governments to decide whether or not any of those teams can participate or not from a health standard. So it pretty much screws over the Pac-12 as like, oh, you're the only Power 5 conference that's not doing this. Everybody else is now doing it, including the Big Ten. It really pisses me off.
And I get that. As frustrating as that might be, and given the fact that governors and state governments have to make these decisions on whether it's safe for players to play, I still feel like the Pac-12 is making the responsible decision that these other conferences can't make. Because like Corbin said, so much of this is influenced by money and TV deals and networking contracts. And
it's all influenced by that. Or parents who want their players to play in the NFL and they feel like they need to showcase their talents this year or else they won't get drafted.
Or you have like boosters, right? Like the people who live in these local markets who are the lifeblood of the program financially are throwing like millions of dollars. You know, you have those people who I'm sure are very opinionated themselves who are saying, hey, I've been a booster for X amount of years, and if you want to continue to have me as a booster, you're going to fucking play football, or I'm going to not pay you anymore. I wouldn't be shocked if that was happening.
We'll see what happens. Be not surprised if you have a situation like in Charlotte where they don't have players that they can field a team. Be not surprised if that happens. And then I would just really love for the Big Ten to flip-flop again, because then that would just make them look like even more of a joke. oh yeah, we shouldn't do this. Oh wait, we're gonna do this. Oh yeah, actually, we shouldn't have done this. Like, oh, it's all money. That's what it is. Don't let these idiots tell you, oh well, we looked at the numbers and safety. No, it's not safe. And these other conferences that are doing it, they're doing it at their own risk. Which, all right, whatever. That's your decision. That's your state's decision. But to say like, oh, we're doing this for the benefit of our student athletes, these kids want to play. It's like, no, you're pretty much telling them, hey guys, you're going to play because we want you to, and if you get sick, then oh well, you get sick.
Yeah, it's really shitty. So we'll kind of see how the college football world plays out. That was really our only story for college football this week. On that note, we will transition into the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. And the feature story is we have the Dallas Stars making the Stanley Cup final for the first time in 20 years.
Yeah, go Stars!
Go Stars! So for the first time in 20 years, the Dallas Stars will have an opportunity to play for the Stanley Cup. And I have to say that going into that series, and Corbin and I were kind of discussing this before the show tonight, if you had told me going into that, the winner of the Western Conference Final was going to win the series 4-1, we were both very much honed in on the fact that that was going to be Vegas 100%.
Yes.
So credit to the Dallas Stars. They handled the Vegas Golden Knights. I was very surprised at how well that they played. They had some really nice goaltending from Anton Khudobin, former Bruin, by the way, just saying. It's nice to see that a team who hasn't had an opportunity to play in the finals in such a long time. Obviously, Vegas went to the finals in their first season in the league, and so it's nice about the fact that a team like the Stars, who haven't even been there in 2 decades, now has a chance to play on that biggest stage. So hat tip to the Dallas Stars. Good for you guys.
Yeah, and then in the Eastern Conference right now, that series is still going on to get to the Stanley Cup. We have Tampa Bay that has a 3-2 series lead over the Islanders. The Islanders survived in overtime last night. They were down 3-1, and they got to win 3 in a row if they want to get to the Cup, and they ended up winning Game 5, so kudos to them. We'll see what they can do in these next 2 games if there are 2 more games.
I think it would be peak 2020 if we got the Islanders and the Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup final.
Oh, I would love it. I mean, 2 brand new teams. Tampa Bay has been really, really good for the last 5 to 7 years. They always seem to be top of the Eastern Conference or toward the top of the Eastern Conference. So to see 2 new, fresh teams, hell, I'm all for it. I think that'd be fun.
And I do ultimately think that Tampa will end up winning that series. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the team that's ahead is going to win. But I feel like Braden Point is really making a name for himself in these playoffs. He's been filling in for Steven Stamkos, who sustained an injury earlier on in the season. He's been out for the entire playoffs. Braden Point was a talented player, and I think everybody knew that, but he's really come alive since the restart and in the NHL playoffs. And Braden Point, man, when he gets to free agency, this kid is going to get paid because he is playing incredibly well for Tampa.
Without a doubt. And like you said, he's been the complete X factor. Without him, who knows if they're still where they're at right now in the playoffs? I would say probably not. We'll see if he continues to stay hot. We'll see if the Tampa Bay Lightning can get through to the Stanley Cup to face off against the Dallas Stars. That'll all be on future episodes here for you.
So we did want to go into our last topic here on the show. This is our English Premier League soccer update for all you soccer heads out there.
Scott Jones!
This is for you. Sheffield United had a game on Monday against Wolverhampton Wolves. Ultimately, Sheffield United come away with the loss 2-0. It was a really, really terrible first 6 minutes of the game. Wolverhampton Wolves, one of those teams that is going to be competing near the top of the table, near the top of the standings this year. And so after 6 minutes, the Wolves end up going up 2-0. And I'm just sitting there watching the game at work like, oh man, this is going to go so bad because everyone is thinking Sheffield United, this is going to be their second season now in the Premier League. A lot of people are saying they're going to struggle this season. And right off the bat, boom, they're down 2-0 to Wolverhampton. Again, a very, very good team. Much better than Sheffield United, I might add. But within 6 minutes of the game, you're already conceding twice. I was like, oh man, this is going to be terrible. But I will give Sheffield credit. I think after that point, after those first tumultuous times in the first 6 minutes of the game, I thought that Sheffield actually had the better chances and more of the ball and things like that going forward. So they kind of came into the game a little bit as it went on. I thought that the overwhelming majority of the game, they were the better side. They just couldn't bury any of their chances, unfortunately.
To add to that, like you mentioned, anytime that you're down 2-0 after the first 6 minutes of a 90-minute game, you start to think the worst, that they're going to get just crushed and obliterated. And credit to Sheffield, even though they lost, they played really, really well after that point of that second goal they gave up. They had chances to score. They had a shot go off of the goalpost, which if it was a few more inches in, it would have potentially been a goal. Who knows where the game would have gone from there. Koenig mentioned it. Wolverhampton's a very, very strong team. I didn't have hope that Sheffield was going to win this game. Our next game is against Aston Villa on Monday, which is a very winnable game for Sheffield United. So hopefully next episode we'll have some better news as far as better results from Sheffield in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I mean, Sheffield did have a match today, and this is known as the Carabao Cup. It's a tournament that English teams are invited to, and it kind of gives them an opportunity to play some of their youthful players, so it doesn't count necessarily towards the Premier League standings or the table or anything like that, but it's a tournament style that allows players who maybe wouldn't be playing during league games an opportunity to play in this tournament.
Exactly. And so these are players that are normally on the bench or their reserves in the club that get their opportunity to show what they can do. And our manager, Chris Wilder, has said after this last game that these younger players are kind of making him think more about what to do with the Premier League roster. These younger players are playing so well that it's almost forcing his hand to say, oh man, I actually need to play this guy over this guy now because this youngster's playing a lot better. So it's a really good opportunity for development and not have to worry about, oh, we lost this game, it's going to hurt us in the Premier League standings. You want to go farther in these tournaments just because you get more and more opportunity to play more and more teams with your youth. But yeah, we lost in penalty kicks, which is unfortunate, but still very, very good to see our young talent out there performing well.
Yeah, definitely. I was very encouraged by some of the young guys, like Corbin said. You could kind of see certain bright spots from certain players, new signings and stuff like that. And we'll kind of get into that in the future as the season unfolds. Ultimately, going out on penalties is never fun. You want to progress further into the tournament, like Corbin said, to give you more opportunities to play more games so that you can develop that youth a little bit more. So unfortunate for Sheffield that they go out in the first round of that tournament, but a few bright spots from some younger players, and hopefully we see them in league games as the season unfolds.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and go into everybody's favorite segment, the unknown. The unknown. So I am in charge of the unknown this week. This week's topic is going to be movies. We're going to do a cinema unknown section.
Oh, shit.
I have 10 options here. And before we get into this, I need Koenig to tell me right now if he wants older or newer.
Oh, newer for sure.
Newer, okay. So, I mean, he doesn't know what he's saying, but I'm going to tell him right now. So, what I have, Koenig, is I have 10 different sets of movies. So, each set has 2 movies. I'm going to tell you movie A, movie B, and all you have to tell me is which movie came out most recent.
Okay.
So, and what I've done for you, too, to help you out even more. So, since there's 10 options, the first option I give you is going to be spaced. The movies are going to be spaced apart by 10 years.
Okay.
And then the next option is going to be 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. And then obviously the last option is going to be 1. So you're going to have some movies that are back-to-back years where you're going to have to do some real, real hard thinking on. But I think the first 4 or 5 you can more or less get just by timeline. So I think if you get 6 or less, you have to drink, and if you get 7 or more, I have to drink.
That sounds pretty difficult.
Well, and again, like if you bomb like some of these movies, no, I'm just kidding. If you do poorly, we can readjust, if you will. But these are all really, really well-known movies, so these aren't going to be like Jimmy Bo and Tingaling go to Beijing. You know, these are gonna be movies that you know. So
Okay.
let's see how you go through the first five. I think if you get 4 or 5 out of the first 5, I think we should stick it to if you get 6 or less, then you drink, and if 7 or more, I have to drink.
Okay. We'll see how
Okay.
it goes.
Okay, so again, here's the first set of movies. Now, you need to tell me which movie is most recent. Okay, now remember, the first set, these movies are spaced apart by 10 years.
Okay.
Okay, the 2 movies are Braveheart with Mel Gibson and Back to the Future. Which of those movies is more recent or came out more recently? Braveheart or Back to the Future?
I feel like Back to the Future, Michael J. Fox, back when he was like really young though. But I think Braveheart is much older. Fuck. I'm gonna say Back to the Future. Final answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's incorrect.
Oh boy.
Back to the Future came out in 1985, and Braveheart came out in 1995.
Oh, really?
So
I would have thought it was the other way around, to be honest.
Ooh. All right. Well, not the greatest start, but we'll adapt if we need to here, okay?
Okay.
All right. Are you ready for your next set?
All right, let's go for it.
Okay. Now, keep in mind, these 2 movies are 9 years spaced apart.
Okay.
Okay. Your first option is Tarzan, and this is the animation Disney movie. So the animated Disney movie, not the George. What was the guy who did The Mummy? What was his name? Adam Fraser or George something.
Wait, not Adam Fraser. He plays baseball.
Something Fraser, right?
Yeah, it's Fraser something.
Okay, well, not that. It's the animated one.
Okay.
With you know what I mean? It's the Disney animated Tarzan.
Disney film.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got it. So Tarzan or Home Alone, the first one with Macaulay Culkin.
Oh, definitely Tarzan. Home Alone came out in like the early 90s, and Tarzan came out in like 2001 or 2002.
So you're saying Tarzan is the newest, or is the most recent film?
The most recent, yeah, for sure.
Final answer?
Yep.
That is correct. Home Alone came out in 1990, and Tarzan came out in 1999.
Okay, I wasn't too far off on those years.
No, fairly close. So, but there you go. So you're 1 for 2. Not bad. Are you ready for your next option?
Yes.
Okay. Keep in mind, these 2 movies are now 8 years spaced apart. Your first option is Elf with Will Ferrell, and then the movie Bridesmaids with all those women. I don't know. I've never really seen Bridesmaids, so I can't tell you. It's popular. I know that.
So
Elf or Bridesmaids?
My wife Hannah would be devastated if I didn't know this. I think I've watched Bridesmaids in my life probably 100 times. And I know for a fact that movie came out when we were at NAU. It was like 2010, 2011, something like that. And I'm sorry, what was the other movie?
Elf.
Elf, yeah. Elf came out in the early 2000s with Will Ferrell. I'm going to say Bridesmaids is newest.
Final answer?
Yes, sir.
You're right on the money. Bridesmaids came out in 2011, and Elf came out in 2003.
All right.
So you're 2 for So you're 2 for 3. Are you ready for your next movie options?
Yes.
Keep in mind, these movies are now spaced 7 years apart. The 2 movies that you have to pick from are The Da Vinci Code and The Great Gatsby. So The Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks and The Great Gatsby with Leo DiCaprio.
The Da Vinci Code is fairly recent. And I know that The Great Gatsby, I want to say that they just recently made that. I didn't see The Great Gatsby. I've read The Da Vinci Code, I've watched the movie. Great Gatsby just sounds like a movie that recently was in theaters not too long ago. I'm going to say The Great Gatsby is newest. Final answer.
That is correct. The Great Gatsby is the newer film. It came out in 2013, and The Da Vinci Code came out in 2006.
Excellent. I'm coming back at a little slip up.
I told you. I said, I knew you'd be fine through the first 5. So you've got 3 out of 4 so far, and we are going into number 5. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Keep in mind, these movies are now 6 years spaced apart from each other. Your two options are Daredevil with Ben Affleck or Titanic, also with Leo DiCaprio.
Daredevil came out in the early 2000s. Pretty sure, like 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. Titanic, I feel like, is a 90s film. So just on that alone, I'm going to say Daredevil is newest. Final answer.
That is correct. Daredevil came out in 2003 and Titanic came out in 1997.
Hell yes. All right.
Okay, so you're 4 for 5. So I think we should stick with our original bet because all you have to do is get 3 of the next 5 and I have to drink.
That's
and
fair.
If you get 2 out of 5, then you owe a drink. So you got to go 60% here and then you've won.
Yeah, I think we'll stick with it. I'm feeling okay now.
Okay, sounds good. So next options, keep in mind these movies are now only 5 years spaced apart.
Okay.
Your movie options are Forrest Gump with Tom Hanks and The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. That's the fucker's name.
Oh man.
Forrest Gump and The Mummy. And the Mummy is the first one because I think they have like 4 remakes.
There's several.
There's a lot. Yeah, it's the original Mummy.
So I want to say that Forrest Gump came out in like the mid 90s. And I'm fairly certain the first Mummy came out either in the late 90s or early 2000s. I'm pretty sure. I will say The Mummy is newest. Final answer.
That is correct. The Mummy came out in 1999 and Forrest Gump came out in 1994.
Awesome.
So you are spot on. So you just need to get 2 more. So you just got to get 2 of the next 4 and you're golden. So you got a 50-50 on all of these. So you just got to go 2 for 4 here. So the odds are in your favor.
I feel like these last few are going to be really tough, though.
Okay, are you ready for your next options?
Yes.
All right, so this next set of films is only 4 years spaced apart. So the first movie is There's Something About Mary with, oh gosh, what's her name? Cameron Diaz. And My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, man.
2 movies. There's Something About Mary and My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
So, shit. There's Something About Mary. I want to say that was in the 90s still. Or was it the 90s? It might have been the early 2000s. I definitely don't.
This is where you really earn your stars.
I don't think My Big Fat Greek Wedding was a 90s film. That much I know for sure. I just don't know, is Something About Mary post 2000 or pre 2000? I want to say There's Something About Mary was like 99. It was like one of the last movies of the millennium.
There's Something About Mary is one of my all-time underrated movies. I think that movie is so awesome.
I'm going to say... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say. It's also, I'm pretty sure it's also one of the last movies that my mother ever saw in theaters, so you can tell how often my mom goes to the movies.
Yeah. I'm going to say My Big Fat Greek Wedding is newest. Final answer.
That is... correct. My Big Fat Greek Wedding was more recent. My Big Fat Greek Wedding came out in 2002. There's Something About Mary came out in 1998.
Awesome. Oh, man.
All right. So all you have to do is go 1 for 3 here. But again, the window is tightening.
Yes.
So now you only have 3 years to work with.
Yes.
Now, keep in mind, these next 3, I tried to keep them more recent. So to give you a clue on all of these, I mean, you don't really need it, but these are all going to be 2000 and newer. So there's nothing in the 90s, nothing in the 80s. So these are all within the last 2 decades.
Okay.
So you don't have to like run your brain through that. So are you ready for your next option?
Yes.
Okay. These movies are now 3 years spaced apart. Your movies that you have to choose from are The Dark Knight.
The first one?
No, the first one is Batman Begins, and that has Scarecrow.
Well,
This one is the one with the Joker and Heath Ledger.
okay.
Yeah. And then Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson.
Okay. I know The Dark Knight for sure because it came out my last year of high school, I want to say, because it was such a huge topic when I was in school. And that was 2008.
Because Heath Ledger died before that film even got released, right?
Yeah, everyone was talking about that. It's such a tragic event. So I'm very confident that The Dark Knight came out in 2008. Wedding Crashers. Did Wedding Crashers come out when I was in high school or college? It was definitely high school. I'm going to say The Dark Knight is newest. Final answer.
That is correct.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight is newest.
Oh.
The Dark Knight came out, like you said, 2008. So that would have been, like last year of high school. And then Wedding Crashers came out in 2005. I'll go ahead. I'll give you the other two here quickly, just so we can have the audience at home can kind of do them if they want. This next set is going to be 2 years spaced apart. We have Guardians of the Galaxy, the first movie, or Deadpool, also the first movie.
Ooh.
So you've only missed one, and the one that you missed was the one that I thought you would get for sure. So you're cooking with gas right now. Maybe this wasn't as hard as I did pick a lot of relatable movies, like movies that I knew you would know. So hopefully that helped.
No, that was super helpful. And I mean, I'm not really a huge movie buff anyways. I watch a lot of sports and I play a lot of video games, and occasionally Hannah and I'll watch occasionally Hannah and I'll watch a movie, but we're really not big into the movies. But for this one, I want to say Deadpool came out like when we were at NAU. I'm going to say Deadpool is newest. Final answer.
That is correct. Deadpool is the newest of the two films. Came out in 2016 and Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014. Final set to see if you can go 9 for 10, 9 in a row.
Gotta get it.
1 year apart. These films are 1 year apart. Which movie is more recent, Avatar or Inception? As you think on that, funny story about Inception, I went to go visit my buddy Rizzo in Chicago, and Inception was out. And so we go to the theater, and I had just flown in from Phoenix, and so I was jet lagged and tired. So we go see Inception, and for people who haven't seen Inception, you really need to pay attention. And
it's a mind fuck. It really is.
If you're not focused, it just goes way over your head. And I was tired. I was worn out. So after like the first 20 minutes, I had no clue what was going on. And before you know it, Rizzo's waking me up. I fell asleep. It's the only movie I've ever fallen asleep during. And this was during like opening weekend. So it was like a packed theater. Like it was a big deal. People were hyped about it. And then there's me just taking a big old nap in the theater, not watching shit.
So I have a decent memory. I know that you went to Chicago when we were sophomores at NAU, or no, we were juniors at NAU, or we were going into our junior year. So it was 2010 when you went. So Inception was out in 2010. The question is, Avatar. I feel like Avatar is such an old movie, but obviously it's not. I'm going to say Inception is newer. Final answer.
That is correct. Inception is the newer film.
Yeah.
Inception came out in 2010, Avatar in 2009. It's amazing that you remember when I went to Chicago. Great memory. But 9 out of 10. So you went 9 in a row. And honestly, I thought you missed the easiest one that was on the board. But
well, here's the thing. Like, I'm not really strong on 80s movies.
So I should have just given you a shitload of 80s movies.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that was entertaining for you and everybody listening at home. I came up with that all by myself. I thought it was pretty creative to kind of reduce the years on the movies. I'm going to go ahead. I've got a fresh full Sierra that I'm going to start pounding right now as my side of the bet. And Candy, go ahead and start saying your goodbyes to the people, and we'll get going here.
I'm convinced that in a previous life, Corbin was like a game show host or something like that. He's always thinking of like these very creative games to play and making rules and stuff like that. So that was actually really entertaining. I know I got 9 out of 10, but some of those, especially some of the last ones, were really difficult. So kudos, tip of the cap to you, buddy, for another fun edition of The Unknown. We do have a whole lot more coming your way in future episodes. Next week will be episode 10. We'll be double digits years old, or episodes old.
Unbelievable. So that's 10 weeks. That's 2.5 months consistent. I mean, we're putting in the grind here on our end. We're appreciative that our fans are enjoying the content that we're putting out, and just know that we work hard, especially Koenig. Guy does all the editing, all the production, everything that you see as far as the final product. The guy cranks it out of the park.
Awesome. So we enjoy it. I mean, this is a hobby for us. It's honestly, we would be coming together to talk about sports anyways. It's kind of what the two of us do. But we're enjoying the hell out of it. I know it's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it to put a good product out for you guys. We hope that you're enjoying it. Before we sign off, we do want to give our beverage rating for tonight's show.
Yes.
Very, very, very important. Corbin, you had the Sierra Nevadas on your end. I'll let you have the reins.
Yeah, so Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I'm not really a pale ale guy too much. I'm kind of a wimp when it comes to beer. I like light beer, so I can just kind of get her in me and get me drunk, honestly. Pale ale, to me, it's kind of bitter, and people who like pale ales like the bitterness in pale ales. It's not something that I would grab all the time. It's definitely something that I like to kind of sip on. I haven't had as many of these as I would, a lighter beer during the show. But you know what? All things considered, for a pale ale, it's one of the better pale ales that I have had. Keep in mind, I'm not a pale ale drinker. I'm going to give this, as far as what it is, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I think it's better than average because there are pale ales that I've drank that just don't do it for me. And there's something here. So if you like pale ales, you never tried Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, go for it. Yeah, I think you'll like it.
All right. So on my end, I had the throwback paying homage to episode 1. I went with the vodka cranberries tonight with that ever so satisfying vodka from Trader Joe's. If you're not boned up on the whole Trader Joe's plug, go ahead and watch our first episode. You'll be amazed at how far our show has come over the last 8 episodes. I mean, it's like night and day. But I had the vodka cranberries. The vodka for the drink, very good, very smooth, distilled from grapes, which is very nice. It doesn't have that really harsh alcohol after flavor, especially with vodka. You get this sometimes with the drinks, and especially cheap vodka, and you drink it and it's got that really like almost metallic aftertaste.
Like Svedka?
Like Svedka, yeah. If you're not boned up on the Svedka reference, watch episode 1. But this one was actually really smooth, and it was really nice to drink. I don't give any perfect scores. Nothing is perfect, but I'm willing to give this a 4.3 out of 5 stars.
Why? Wow, it's pretty damn good.
So next time you're at the Trader Joe's, give it a pickup. But that's all we have for you on this week's show, episode 9. Like I said before, we do have episode 10 coming your way next week. I'm sure we'll have something special for that. I'll be in charge of the unknown next week, so I'm going to have to think of something pretty special in honor of our 10th episode.
Yeah.
We'll have the NBA, probably looking towards the NBA Finals at that point. I'm sure we'll have MLB updates. The MLB season is kind of coming towards the tail end as they kind of get ready for the playoffs. I'm sure we'll have some baseball updates for you people. We'll have week 2 of the football season to recap for you folks at home. And I'm sure we'll have a preview and predictions for the Stanley Cup Finals, and a whole lot more, of course. I've been your host, Koenig, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Corbin. Say goodnight to the people, Corbin.
To all my Swedes out there, good morning, and I hope you have a great day.
Good night, everyone.